All right.
Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, so we're going to start into our meeting. And before we start, I'd like to read the land. The City of Lakes really acknowledges we are situated on Mississauga lands and the traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We are grateful for the opportunity to work here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of Métis and other Indigenous peoples in shaping and strengthening this community. So let's move to the adoption of the agenda. And as far as I can see right now, there's no changes to the agenda. Good evening, Jonathan. All right. Can I have someone move the acceptance of the agenda? Ian, seconded by Jim. Okay, forward. I'll ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest that are on this evening. None. We'll move forward to the adoption of the minutes. I know we got these out to you a little late this time, so I hope you've all had time to read them. Is everyone ready to make a motion to accept the minutes? Skip, seconded by Bill. Thank you. So we move into our presentations and deputations. There are no deputations tonight, so we'll move forward into the first report, which is about the heritage planning update from our heritage planner. Thank you, Emily.
Okay, so there's a few things. So there's the update on the council meeting, and then I do have a couple of other items that came up after the agenda was out. So the first thing is at the September 27th council meeting, council got a whole bunch of heritage stuff and it all went well. There was the proposed designation for 33 North Water Street in Kobe. So council directed staff to issue the notice of intention to designate for that. So I think it's going out in this Thursday's paper. The proposed amendment for the designating bylaw for 17 Sussex Street North. Also, council's good with that. And the notice of intention to amend has been issued to the property owner for that one. The designating bylaw for 761 Salem Road was passed, and the big shocker is that council received the objection for the listing of the Manila General Store and decided to leave it on the register. So that's yeah, that was quite nice. So those were passed by consent, which is fine. So we didn't have any discussion on that, but yeah, they were passed on the consent agenda. So that's it for the council meeting updates. We don't have anything else to this council at all. So anything else the committee will have will be the new committee and the new council. So that'll be a little bit further on down the menu. The next thing is I had a discussion with Carrie Kish, who is one of our building and property staff, and they are getting going on a project at the Finland Falls train station. So it is effectively, they're fixing it up. So the contractors were out there this week, and she sent me a list of what they're doing. So I'll just sort of read it to you. So they're doing exterior repairs focusing on the wood surfaces. So they will be doing a look around the building, seeing where there's rot and water intrusion, and replacing board and batten boards where there is rot or where they're disintegrating. They will be doing cleaning and restaining on the finials on the roof, the soffits, the walls, the window frames, doors, and door frames. Metal fixtures, so exterior lights, brackets, and handles are going to be sanded and repainted. They may also be working on the deck and the handrail. So that's the entrance, which is less the building and more the entrance. But that's sort of depending on how much the bids come in. So that's kind of a sort of a secondary thing. So the color scheme for the project is going to be the same. So that red color that they currently have now, as well as black and white. They're also going to be taking down the two signs, the Finland Falls sign and the Baggage Area sign, and they're going to be fixed. So they're going to be repainted, cleaned up, so they're nice and crisp and not disintegrating. So the timeline on this is that they're hoping to get going in the fall. That might not happen depending on how the weather goes. I mean, if it gets cold quickly, obviously you're not gonna be able to do this work. And if not, they'll do it in the spring. So obviously they're meeting with the contractors and getting bids pretty much right now. So they were on site last week. But they will have it done by the time the art gallery opens in the spring. So when the gallery opens for the summer season, the train station will be good and ready to go. So that's the plan. So it's painting, sanding, fixing boards, all very good news stuff. Carrie has some details for that. Once they get some more specs, she can share those. And she said if the committee has any questions, just let me know and I'll send them along to her and she can send along any more information. But it's really early days right now. They're just getting quotes on that, but that's the plan and that's the timeline. So it's a very good news project from Carrie.
It is
so
a very good news project. Excuse me for interjecting, but we've been trying to push this forward for about 3 years or more now. So it's fantastic news.
Yeah, and I had a chat with Carrie about this, and it turns out that she's also been trying to get the budget for this one as well. So this is a project that she'd really like to see done. Yeah, I think the train station will look great when this is completed. So we'll see when the work completes, and yeah, that's great. And maybe in the spring we can all go and have a look at it. And then the last thing is just reapplication to the committee. So I sent an email about this on Thursday, I think. So the applications have opened for the committee for the next term of council. So if you want to be on the committee again, either apply on the website, the applications are there, and you can send that application in to our clerk's office, or if you just send me an email, which some people have already done, indicating that they would like to continue on the committee, I'll forward that to the clerk's office. They will all go into the folder for the end of the month, which is the deadline. So they need to be in by Friday, the 28th at 4 p.m. So if you do want to be back on the committee, let me know by that point. And then once we have all the applications, we'll be going through those to see who's going to be back on the committee for next year. And because this is a statutory committee, we're hoping to get it not to the first council meeting, because that'll just be kind of inaugurating a new council, that kind of thing, but to the second council meeting, which is at the end of November, which means that we'll be without a committee for like 2 weeks, which is really not a big deal at the end of things. But we can continue to meet for urgent type items until the new committee is appointed. So heritage permits, planning applications, demolition requests, those sorts of things, this committee can continue to meet for statutory items. We just won't have any kind of non-statutory fun stuff. For the subcommittees that are still doing work, feel free to keep working away on that. But what I will do is I will touch base with all the subcommittees prior to the new committee of council being put in place, just so I kind of have a roadmap of where everybody is at with their various projects, so that they can be picked up by whoever chooses to be on the new committee once that's established at the end of November. So that's the update on sort of general heritage planning stuff. Is there anything anything else people need to know?
Seeing hands, may I have the of this report information? Anne and Ian. All right, moving forward, we're at the Heritage Conservation District and Cultural Heritage Landscape Landscape Strategies, first draft reviews. So it's a big report that Emily put together, and let's pass it back to you, Emily, to take us through it.
Thanks, Ethel. Okay, so this is kind of a policy first draft review. So as most people on the committee know, although some of our new folks haven't done this yet, when policy is being developed, the committee gets a first stab at the draft before it's finalized to provide some comments. So what this is two strategic framework documents, essentially, in order to help guide the city in terms of how we develop new heritage conservation districts and how we identify and preserve cultural heritage landscapes. So this is really coming out of the Heritage Inventory project. So through the project, obviously, we're going to be identifying a lot of different cultural heritage resources. And this is going to help provide some direction for the city in terms of what we do with those more complex cultural heritage landscapes, how we preserve them, so on and so forth. So obviously, if we identify some important buildings, sort of singular ones, we can pursue listing or designation. It's fairly straightforward. But now that we're getting a whole bunch of data on these larger areas of cultural heritage value, we need some kind of guiding documents in terms of how we address those. So these sorts of things do a few things. They provide some transparency to our processes. So when people are saying, why are you choosing this area as a heritage conservation district, so on and so forth, it provides that background. So these do that kind of thing. And then they also provide a roadmap for staff, committee, and council in terms of what we're actually doing. So it doesn't seem like we're just kind of doing stuff randomly. So we want to make sure that everything we do has some background justification. So that is what these documents are for. At the moment, we don't really have any kind of policy or strategic direction on either of these two items. We do have some stuff in our official plan directing us to conserve cultural heritage resources in general, which is great, but it's not really helpful. We also have some direction through provincial policy on the cultural heritage landscape front, but once again, it's fairly general. So this is a little bit of a more closer roadmap of what we want to do. So I'll just kind of run through briefly what is in each of these things. And then we can have a chat if you have questions. So I think there's a few things that we can do here. If you have specific comments now, then that is great. Or people can, after we've discussed them a little bit, people can go away, have a look, provide some comments afterwards. These are going to come back to the committee a couple of times before they go to council. So this isn't like a one and done sort of thing. So we have some time to massage and make these better and add things, take away things, that kind of thing, before council sees them. Okay, so just having a quick look at the cultural heritage landscape strategy. So this deals with our various landscapes within the city. And this ties in nicely to our Skugogriver project, which, I mean, that's what it is, right? So this is, for that project, this provides some of that kind of strategic background for projects such as that. So the goal of the strategy is to provide that high level framework for identification, evaluation, protection, and we don't have an approach right now. So we really need that. So there's a few things. So we have the policy and legislative framework overview. That's really just the background information on it. So that's a few pages of just going through the legislation. At the moment, all of our provincial land use planning policy directs municipality to conserve heritage landscapes. And there's a number of tools under the Heritage Act and the Planning Act for us to do so. So we do have the policy and legislative direction to do that. It gives an overview of the 3 types of CHLs, just for some background information for when we discuss those, so people know what they are. We also provide some high level goals for cultural heritage landscape conservation. So what we're looking for here, I mean, the main goal is to preserve and enhance their cultural heritage values and attributes while encouraging sensitive evolution and growth. So recognizing that our landscapes will change with development and as we go through time, but ensuring that the policies and protection mechanisms we put in place ensure that those values are preserved. It also directs the city to use the mechanisms available to it in order to preserve those landscapes. Then we get into the identification and evaluation of landscapes. So obviously these are a little bit more complex than going out and identifying important buildings, for example, because they're quite complex. So there's a few means of identification: community identification, relevant plans and studies undertaken by the city. Probably the latter is going to be the main way that these are identified, mostly because most people in the community don't know what a cultural heritage landscape is, to be perfectly honest. Where the community would be identifying these is if they're asking for, say, for example, a neighborhood to be designated as an HCD. That's a sort of a good example of where we'd have some community identification of that kind of resource. So once again, we're looking at evaluation based on Ontario Regulation 906, so our usual type thing. And then also noting that we need to identify the tangible and intangible attributes of the area, and ensuring that we have boundaries for it too. So one of the important things when we're looking at landscapes is we need to sort of draw a box around them. That enables us to use some of the mechanisms available to us. We have to know what the extent is. So that's an important thing. Now this also runs through the tools for protecting landscapes. So there's 5 primary direct protection mechanisms, which they all do different things and they're appropriate for different areas. So this discusses when that might happen. So listing, individual designation as an HCD, those are kind of our usual type ones that we use. And those would be used in different situations. So listing is kind of that preliminary, not going through the whole process way to identify it. Individual designation sort of used for concrete individual parcels. So farms, estates, cemeteries, those kinds of landscapes that are confined to one parcel of land. HCDs, larger areas, multiple parcels, your neighborhoods, your downtowns, those kinds of things. The other 2 are things that we don't generally do, but we certainly have them available. And I suspect we probably will end up doing them in future. So it's good to lay them out here. The first is entering into a heritage easement agreement with regard to the property. So for those of you who are not familiar with heritage easement agreement, they're legal documents entered into by the city or the Ontario Heritage Trust. In this case, it would be the city with a property owner agreeing which attributes of a property to conserve. And these are usually done as part of development agreements. So subdivisions, site plan agreements. It would probably be subdivisions. That's usually where you would be using these for cultural heritage landscapes. So for example, you would provide in the subdivision agreement a condition that a heritage easement agreement is required before the subdivision agreement is executed, which would outline how that area is to be conserved while the subdivision is being constructed. And then the last one is protection under the Planning Act through an official plan amendment. So this is where specific policies are put into an official plan, outlining a cultural heritage landscape and conservation policies that apply to it. And this is usually used for those kinds of landscapes where you don't necessarily have really concrete boundaries to it, where it's a little bit more fluid, or where the attributes are things that are a little bit more intangible. So things like views or vistas, that's the most appropriate mechanism in many cases for protecting those. There's also a few other ones that are identified. Those are kind of secondary ones, things like community design guidelines, provisions in zoning bylaws, but they're sort of your secondary type tools for looking at those. And the last thing we have in there is community participation and engagement. So obviously we need to be doing that for our various protections. So we have, CHLs are complex. It really depends what you're doing. So it is difficult to identify an engagement strategy. Effectively, we're saying we're going to do it. So if you have, if you have a farm where the property owner comes forward and asks for it to be designated in Part 4 of the Act, that is extremely easy community consultation. And that's what we do with our Part 4 designations, whether it's a singular resource or a landscape. If you're looking at a conservation district, for example, then you're looking at a much more complex consultation framework. So that's what's in the CHL strategy. And the Heritage Conservation District strategy is similar, but it does have a few different items in it. So the main goal is to guide the development of new districts. So we want to make sure that we are fair, consistent, and transparent in how we do this. And it also assumes that we're going to do more districts. So that's, I mean, that is what it sets the stage for, is for the city to identify and create new heritage conservation districts. So it starts off with your policy and legislative framework. Same idea as the other one. It's supported through our official plans. So we have the policy and legislation to back us up on that. Then we get into some goal setting. So once again, high level goals. In this particular area, because conservation districts are very different in urban, hamlet, and rural areas, we have some different goals that are set aside for those that try and speak to the different sort of community context of our various types of communities in the city. I mean, the things we're doing in urban areas are very different than what we're doing in our rural areas. So we want to make sure that we recognize that in our goal settings. And really what we're doing is we're looking at enhancing our historic areas and providing policies and strategies for sensitive growth. That is pretty much the goal of district designation in general. So that is why that's in there. So the next thing we get into is processes for district nomination. So there's a few different ways that nominations can come forward. So through the committee, through council, through the community, or through council, the Municipal Heritage Committee, or staff, which is, I mean, that's how we figure these things out anyways. That's pretty straightforward. One thing that it does identify is that if people, particularly community members, do come forward with nominations, there is some information they need to provide us. So if a community member wants an area designated as an HCD, they've got to do at least the preliminary background research before they present it to the city. Because we want to know what they're asking for and whether or not really this is worth pursuing. So we're not just getting requests willy-nilly on areas where there really isn't any background information. So it needs to be a well-researched request. And obviously, if someone on the city side of things, whether that's this group or staff or council, there would also need to be that background research done. The next area is something that is necessary because this is a huge municipality. So this is about prioritizing areas for study. Effectively, what this is doing is ensuring that all of our conservation districts are not in Lindsay. To be perfectly honest, that is what this is about. So one of the things that we need to think about while we're doing studies and recommending them to council is ensuring that we're not prioritizing all of our urban areas, and that the HCDs that we're putting forward represent the breadth of the municipality and its various heritage resources and our communities across the city. I've also identified that staff will create, with the assistance of the committee, a priority list for district designation based on identified guidelines. I haven't done that yet, so that's a sort of a to-do once the policy is adopted. So if council eventually adopts this strategy, then that is creating a priority list will be something that we'll have to work on so that we can present that to council so they know where various things are on our priority list. The next is consistent criteria for evaluation. So as some of you may know, there are actually no criteria for evaluating heritage conservation districts, which is extremely unhelpful when it comes to being consistent in our approach to them. So we developed a criteria framework during the Old Mill Heritage Conservation District study. It was based on the framework used by the City of Toronto, and that's what's in here. So we've put that down as this is our framework that we're going to use, and it means that what we do is going to be consistent. We use the same criteria. They're based on Ontario Regulation 906, but expanded due to the complex nature of conservation districts. And yes, so no one is sort of guessing in the dark. So if staff do a conservation districts study in future, if we get a consultant to do one in future, everyone has to use the same criteria. The last section is just discussing community participation and engaged engagement strategies. So as we probably know, most of, under the Heritage Act, we're only required to have one public meeting for an HCD, which is unhelpful with regard to engaging the community. So there's just an outline here to help engage the community on some different processes, methods that we might do that: community meetings, jump in, direct mail, community advisory group, as well as direct engagement with our relative stakeholders and our First Nations partners. Okay, that is the overview. It's a lot. They're two substantial documents. So this is just sort of a first chance for you guys to look at them. And if you have any questions or comments, now is the time to ask them. And you can also go away and have a look at them and then shoot some comments back at me. I'll be working on this over the winter, so it's going to take a while to massage it into its final form. Here we go. All right, have at it.
All right. It sounds like some of this is going to help us with our Skugogriver Conservation District and give us options that we need to look at, and we are in fact looking at. So that's great. Any questions? Bill?
Is a landscape a new criteria, Emily? I hadn't heard that before, but we've had properties and districts. But is this something that's been the committee has dealt with in the past?
Not really. So sort of here's the thing with landscapes. So landscapes were identified as sort of a type of heritage resource by UNESCO back in the early 1990s. But they've never really been incorporated into the lexicon of the Ontario Heritage Act. So nowhere in the Heritage Act does it say cultural heritage landscape. Where it is identified is in provincial planning policy. So through the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, there's discussion about preserving cultural heritage landscapes. So a landscape, there's a couple kinds of heritage. So there's like singular heritage resources, that'd be like a house or a barn or a I don't know, like a heritage tree or something. So like one thing that's kind of on its own. And that's really what this committee has dealt with. We've never really looked into cultural heritage landscapes except through our heritage conservation districts. Cultural heritage landscapes are those sort of more complex resources where you have a whole bunch of different things working together to form a singular resource. So like a family farm is like the example that people always use in Ontario because it's a really good example. So yes, the house might be important, but there's also the barn, the outbuildings, the fields, the fences, the layout. So that's kind of what a cultural heritage landscape is. So this committee has dealt with landscapes through our heritage conservation districts. So heritage conservation districts are all landscapes. It's sort of the nature of what they are, but they're not always called that, which is a bit confusing. We do have one designated cultural heritage landscape, and it's 761 Salem Road, which was like just designated, just designated, but it was designated as a as an individual property, but the wording is in the bylaw as a cultural heritage landscape. We didn't discuss it as a committee. I just put it in there to be perfectly honest. Just to kind of clarify that that's what it was. But we haven't really had this discussion as a committee about protecting or identifying cultural heritage landscapes. It's kind of popped up occasionally, but we've never really talked about it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. You'll get some reactions and we'll go from there. But for myself personally, I think, and then I really enjoyed reading it. And I think it'll get more information as it goes on.
Yeah, so if people want to read through now that we've talked about it, send some comments, that's great. And we'll come back to the committee with a second draft of this at some point in the winter. And then the final before it goes to council. So that's sort of the progression of things. So there'll be lots of chance to kind of digest this and provide some comments and to make it better. And if you do have questions about anything in it, just let me know. I'm happy to, if there's things you're like, what the hell is that talking about? I'm happy to provide some explanation. And if you don't know what it means, then it probably means I need to explain it better in the strategy so that council knows what I'm talking about too.
All right, may I ask someone to move the acceptance of this draft for information? And I have Jim and then Sandy. All those in favor? Thank you. Carried. Move on now to a report, part 5, permit 2020, which is a report of, I guess. So Emily, it's back to you.
Thanks, Ethel. So this is just a list of the permits approved in Heritage Conservation Districts in 2022. Yeah, there's fewer of them than there were in 2021, which is kind of nice, makes my job easier. But this is just kind of an FYI for the committee, since these do not come forward to the committee unless it's something large. The vast majority of the ones are signage in downtown Quincy, which is probably not a surprise to anybody. The other ones, so there's only 2 that weren't signage. So there's the one on Oak Street at 45 Oak Street. It was landscaping. They were reorienting the driveway. It wasn't particularly interesting or problematic. It was fairly straightforward. And then the last one was at 8284 Kent Street West, which is a public art project. It's sort of on the edge of whether or not they actually needed a heritage permit for it, but I'll just kind of give you a rundown of what it is. So this is at Ward's Lawyers in the alley, and what they're intending on doing is doing a mural on the ground of the alley, which is interesting. So they have put out a call for artists for that. And I've seen the design, it's fine. But there's nothing being attached to the building. So there's nothing in our conservation district plan about this, and it doesn't fall under signage. But they put in a heritage permit application for it anyways, just to ensure that they were following process. So that's that's it. Nothing too exciting, which is kind of nice.
Are there any questions? All right, may I have someone move the acceptance of this information, this report for information? Ian and Anne. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. So, and move on to 4, which is Municipal Heritage Committee 2019 to 2022 accomplishments document, which again, it'll come back to you, Emily.
Okay, this is really just the good job everybody report to wrap us up for this term of the committee. So really, this is just a summary of everything that you guys have done over the past 4 years, and good job. This committee has accomplished a lot of stuff in the current term since it began. Well, I mean, I guess it was put in place at the end of 2018, but 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. And considering a couple of those years were in a pandemic amid lockdowns, good job, everyone. I mean, we've accomplished quite a lot. So just sort of the main things. So we had 10 new properties designated individually during this time period, which is a lot. So that's great. The Old Mill Heritage Conservation District study was initiated, and it's been endorsed by council, and the plan's ongoing. We started listing properties. So prior to 2019, Kawartha Lakes had never listed properties on the Heritage Register. So our first listed properties were identified in fall of 2019. And since then, we've almost listed 300 properties, which is a lot. So that's great. The committee has assisted in a lot of policy development. So as people who have worked with me for a number of years know, I'm a huge policy nerd, which means I make committee review it a lot. But that's really good, good for our heritage programming. So prior to 2019, our policies were very weak, and that is not the case now. So good job to the committee for reviewing and providing comment on all of these lists of things, which I'm not going to read them out because there's a lot of them. That's really helpful for our heritage planning going forward, and it'll help guide stuff in the future. Alteration applications. So the committee looked at 23 alteration applications for individually designated properties, which is quite a few, and some minor ones and some much more major ones, and went through those and provided recommendations to the property owners and staff, and did a great job. The committee also provided comment on 12 planning applications. That's quite substantial, and that's great that this committee is now more involved in the planning process when it involves heritage properties. So we definitely want to keep doing that. The heritage inventory started, and thanks for everyone on the committee who's volunteering to help out with that. And it's gonna be going on for like the next 10 years. So that's not going away. So good job and keep doing that. And we also did 4 doors open events. So we did doors open every year over the past 4 years. So 2019 was an in-person event. We had 2 digital/driving tour events in 2020 and 2021. And then we were back to our in-person events this year. So great job to the organizing committee. It's not a lot of committees managed to do that throughout the pandemic. So those are the big ones. So this is really just like pat yourselves on the back. Great job, committee. And also, if anybody's watching this meeting afterwards, they can see all the great things that we did.
Thank you very much for that report, Emily. Are there any questions or comments? Anne? You're on mute, Anne.
Sorry, I hit it. It didn't go. I was going to say, for the alteration applications, that's kind of an important statistic when people are concerned about becoming heritage designated, to let them know that we reviewed 23 and all 23 were approved.
All 23 weren't approved, I don't think.
Oh, I thought we had
review. There was one that wasn't approved. I think I forgot to put that in there.
Oh, okay.
But yes, most of them are approved.
Still.
There's one that wasn't approved. I know what it was. It was actually right when I started. It was a window replacement. But yeah, there were 23 approved ones, and then not this other not approved one, which it didn't make it on the report.
All right. Any further comments? I know for myself personally, I'm amazed and honored to have been part of this committee and all the things that it's been able to achieve. It's quite wonderful. Thank you. May I have someone move the acceptance of the report for information? I have Sandy and then Bill Peel. All those in favor? Thank you, it's carried. So now we'll move on to the subcommittee updates. And the first one is your properties. So.
Oh, Ethel, you froze there for a second.
All right. So what you heard, so the designated properties subcommittee report. I think, does this bounce back to you, Emily?
Sure, I'll run through it really quick. So the designated properties subcommittee met on September 22nd and just put together sort of game plan for visiting all the various city-owned heritage properties. There's a few with interior features that I can arrange. I'm going to arrange with building and property staff to go into. So what the subcommittee is going to do is divide, there's a lot of them, there's 16 of them to visit. So we'll divide them up just so it's not a huge day. So the committee is going to do a Lindsay Day, because there's quite a few in Lindsay, Bob Cajun, Finland, Kobe Norland Day, and then a Woodville Pontypool Omimi Day. So I'm just reaching out to Building and Property now, and then everyone's going to visit the sites. And that's the update.
Are there any questions relating to subcommittee? There being none, may I ask on the subcommittee to move the accept information? Jim Garbutt moves. May I have a seconder? Okay, Skip seconds. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving along, we have minutes from the September 22nd, 2022 Designated Properties Subcommittee meeting.
Oh, it's doors open.
Oh, I
Oh,
guess
sorry, the minutes are just kind of there because they're in the agenda as an attachment.
Yeah, so
We
I
can just
have
move
to.
on to doors open.
We're not going to move the acceptance.
Well, if we accept we can accept them all at once with Jim and Skip's motion to make it easier. We'll do that with the
Alright.
other ones too.
Let's move on then to the doors open subcommittee, and I guess that bounces to Ian.
Thank you, Athol. So the Doors Open subcommittee, which consisted of myself, Emily Turner, Laura Love, and Bill Peel, met via Zoom on Friday, I guess it was, September 30th. And we just sort of recapped the Doors Open event, which, as Emily said, was our first in-person event in a few years. That happened on Sunday, September 11th. We had, I guess it was it 11 sites this year, Emily, participating, and a few driving tours. Attendance at the sites, I think it's safe to say it ranged from about 20 to 40. Would that be about accurate? And there were many positive comments that I heard, and I believe the others heard. We discussed at our meeting the need next year to put considerably more resources, I think, into promotion and publicity. And part of this will involve a conversation with the Ontario Heritage Trust about sort of, I guess, the direction they want to take Doors Open in. There's been some, I guess, concern about their kind of where they are at with Doors Open, and perhaps Emily could elaborate a bit more on that. But on the whole, it was a great event. There were some interesting activities and sort of value-added features at some of the sites, and we'll do it all again next year. Emily, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's pretty much the gist of it. So but just to elaborate on the issues with the trust. So in the past, the Heritage Trust has been very involved in Doors Open and has provided support to communities for marketing, and they maintain the website. That has not been the case over the past couple of years. So we've had some challenges getting stuff on the website, getting marketing support from the trust, so on and so forth. So I think it's really worth a conversation when we start thinking about our next event to sit down with the trust and see what they're actually doing. And if that's nothing, then figure out how we're going to compensate for the loss of support from the trust, and to ensure that the things that we actually need them to do, like update the Doors Open website, because they have control over that, are done in a timely manner.
Thank you for the report. So I will hold off motion to accept until all. Next one is the Heritage Conservation District Subcommittee, and there are minutes from September 6th.
But we do need a motion to accept the update on the subcommittee, the doors open subcommittee. So we need one for each subcommittee, but not for the minutes separately.
Okay. So
If that makes
may
sense.
we have someone move the minutes? Bill? And Sandy? All those in favor? All right, moving on to the Heritage Conservation District Subcommittee. And this will go back to you, Emily.
Great, okay, so a few items here. So just quickly, our subcommittee, our last meeting, we just talked about the general getting going on the plan and how the public meetings would work. So yeah, the public meetings did not go particularly well. So there were some people who were there. So thank you for coming out. But just an update on that, there are a lot of people who do not want the district to go forward. And a lot of the people who do want the district to go forward were not there. So we're going to have some challenges overcoming some public opinion on this. And certainly one of the things we're going to have to deal with is what the level of community support is, because during the study, the level was very high. And now that we're getting into the plan, it appears quite low. So we'll need to figure that out and provide some evidence to council, because as you know, one of the things that drives council decision making quite heavily is public opinion on things. So that's the sort of the challenge with the Heritage District at the moment. So the subcommittee, we can reconvene, I think, a little bit later in the month to run through that. In the meantime, I have quite a bit of community feedback that we can chat about. We can chat about the public meetings, the stations that we ran to solicit various feedback from people were not very well attended. So that's where we're at with the Heritage District study.
Any comments or questions? All right, I would need someone to move the acceptance of the report. Jim? All those in favor?
Sorry, who seconded it?
Jim?
Oh, sorry, who moved it?
Skip.
Oh, okay, Skip and Jim. Sorry, great. I heard you say Jim, but I wasn't sure who the other person was. Great, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor? The motion is carried. All right, we're moving on to the next subcommittee, and that's the sign subcommittee. So this pops over to you, Jim. You're on mute, Jim. Bottom left corner. There we go.
Is that better?
That's it.
Okay, good. It had disappeared from my screen, so I'm going blind here. So it's anyway, I have no updates. There's no additional information at this point.
There being no report, can we move on to the Skugogriver Subcommittee? And this will go back to Ian.
Great, thanks, Ethel. So the committee, which consists of Ethel and Julia and oh, I'm drawing a blank.
John.
John, yeah, and myself. We met at Julia's place a week ago Monday on September the 26th. It was just sort of an informal meeting at this point to discuss our priorities for where we want to take the committee and what exactly we want to focus on. So we agreed that our first steps will involve a couple of walkabouts on either side of the river within sort of Lindsay proper. So that would be probably from Carew Park down to the locks, and then or at least the old mill, and then from kind of King Street down to Logie Street. And we haven't confirmed that that's the section of the river that we would be necessarily focusing on. We want to take notes of things like vistas, as Emily was discussing earlier, in relation to cultural heritage landscapes, vistas and viewpoints, landmarks, any items of heritage interest that are not necessarily natural heritage features, but are man-made, that are located adjacent or along the river. Any particularly important natural heritage landscape features that we want to take into account when we do this. All of these things we will be studying as we go for these walks, and we'll make some notes and we will bring them back to this committee via the subcommittee. Athol, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that about covers it. We're actually wanting to do these walks so we can define what the area is, because as Emily said, they always want boxes around things. So we have to define the limits of our boxes. And Ian's going to be leading our tours, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. So.
And those will happen within the next week or so, I'm hoping.
Well, we're hoping they happen in the better weather than the last time we walked down there.
Yeah, you won't have to bring skis this time, or skates.
Ice cleats. All right, any questions for the subcommittee? There being none, I ask a motion to accept. Skip and then Anne. All those in favor? Thank you very much. The motion is carried. And there's the chair of the Pickerel Point subcommittee is not here, so I do not believe he provided something to you, did he, Emily? All right, there being none, we move on to correspondence. Do we have any correspondence, Emily?
Nope, nothing.
There being none, we can move on to new or other business. All right, see no hands. I will then move on to next meeting. Emily?
Okay, so technically this is the last regularly scheduled meeting of this committee, but we also have another meeting scheduled for November 3rd. So that is our just in case there's a statutory issue we have to deal with meeting. So we'll put the next meeting down as November 3rd, sort of time to be announced. Well, actually, we'll do it our regular time at 5 because it's sort of our regular Thursday thing. But we'll only meet if we get, a permit application, a planning act application to review, those kinds of things, which we might not get. So I will let everybody know at least a week ahead of time what's happening for that meeting. It'll be short. If we do meet, there's only 1 or 2 items. And if we don't meet then, that's it. It'll be with the new committee next time.
All right, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all very much for being wonderful participants in this committee, and I hope to see some of us in the future if I'm on the committee in the future. So wishing you all well. May I entertain a motion for adjournment? I have Skip and then Jim. So thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Hope to see-
Athol. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, everybody.